What is up, everybody? Thank you so much for hanging out and hanging on. This is Shout, a Buffalo Bills football podcast, the staple show. He is Ryan Talbot. I am Matt Parrino. We are so excited to be with you on this Wednesday ahead of week 3. Ryan Talbot, we got a busy show tonight. Are you excited?
I'm very excited, Matt. Happy to be here. Like you said, this is the staple show, so I'm ready and raring to get ready to go here.
Uh, Shout is brought to you by Tops Friendly Markets. Whether you're celebrating at home or away this weekend, having some family parties, getting together for the game, Tops has all your fan favorites ready to enjoy for football, entertaining, or any occasion. Get to Tops Friendly Markets this weekend. All right, so a little bit of a rundown here at the top, what we're going to get into today. I got a couple things. We talked to AJ Epenesa today during practice. I want to get into that a little bit, rehash his game from Sunday. I want to do a little bit more of a deep dive on Josh Allen's game because we talked about it pretty much in length, but I think we both had a chance to go back, watch the game, talk to Brian Dable, Sean McDermott, and Josh Allen. I want to dive into that a little bit more. We're going to start off the show. We got a clip from Josh Allen here that we'll begin with. We'll get into some injuries, some news. There were some workouts this week. There was some a new signing back to the practice squad. Little cliffhanger there. Stay tuned. I know you're all excited to hear about it. And then we will be joined at 8:30 exactly. It's going to be our first look at the Buffalo Bills versus the Washington football team. Sam Fortier from the Washington Post is going to join us. I'm so excited to have him on. And then we're going to have another show on Friday, Ryan. We're going to preview this thing in full on Friday after we get that first look as the week progresses.
Yeah, a lot in store tonight, a lot on Friday. Like I said, Bills are 1-1 now, so now we turn the page to Washington, and there's plenty to talk about. So why don't you get us started here a little bit with Josh Allen and what he had to say today, Matt?
Yeah, so Josh was at the podium today, and we got a little bit of, he was very, he gave a self-assessment about where things have been the last couple of games. The preseason, it went so well. I mean, this offense was moving the ball up and down the field, and it's almost like, see that red light on the highway and your car comes crashing to a screeching halt. It's almost what this passing game has went through the last 2 weeks. Now, there's some things we're going to get into, but here is Josh talking a little bit about what's been going wrong or what he's been dealing with here early on in the season.
I demand so much of myself, and I want to execute at such a high level. When things aren't going the way, I get so frustrated with myself. So I got to find a way to keep going, be light for the guys, and be the best leader that I can be for this team. I want it so bad that it's hard to tone down that aspect when I expect something out of myself and something I can do when I do regularly in practice, and I've shown it. And there's sometimes, obviously there's a couple times in the games where I've missed, and maybe letting it affect me too much. So just trying to. The best quarterbacks are the ones that can forget about the previous play and move on to the next. And guys make mistakes, guys make missed throws. It's how we bounce back from it that makes us who we are, and that's what we're looking forward to do. I'm excited to get out there on Sunday and get the ball to our guys.
So first things first, I think that what he's talking about there is, I think it was to be expected in a lot of ways. And people talk about the regression and, 2019 Josh Allen. Well, you go back in last season, there wasn't a lot of adversity for this offense. It clicked pretty well, pretty fast, Ryan. And I think part of that was there was no tape on this offense with Stephon Diggs and what that was going to mean and how defenses had to play him. I think defenses have adjusted quite a bit as we've seen in these first 2 weeks. And I feel like these two defenses specifically are tailor-made to make things more difficult on Josh Allen. And I think the good news, if you're a Bills fan, is he's gone through these frustrations now, week 1, week 2, and maybe better prepare himself for going through these situations as things maybe get easier against some other defenses. And when he gets to those tougher matchups down the season, he can kind of pick from these experiences and go back to them and react in different ways.
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. Listen, football is kind of like chess. There's tape out there, like you said, and these defenses have started to adjust to the Bills. You saw in Pittsburgh, they were able to get pressure with just their front. They knew that if you blitzed Josh Allen last year, he was going to make you pay for it. So they just got it done with their guys up front. Last year, wide receivers were running wild against the Miami Dolphins. This year, week 2, although, obviously the final score is pretty lopsided, I thought that the Dolphins cornerbacks did a really good job bracketing Stephon Diggs and Cole Beasley. So defenses have adjusted to what the Bills were putting on tape last year. Now it's up to Josh Allen and company to adjust to what they're seeing.
Brian Dable, I was really taking it. I was going to write a big takeout on Josh Allen, and it's up at the site now, New York Upstate, Syracuse.com. You could go check it out, give it a read. Everything that we heard about Josh Allen's early season struggles from Brian Dable, Sean McDermott, and Josh himself, you can read that right now. But talking to Brian on Monday about Josh, I thought he gave a really kind of interesting look into that dynamic between coordinator and quarterback. And he said he walked into the meeting rooms with him and talking to him on Monday before the press conference. And he said he didn't want to go as far as to say that he looked despondent, but he was pretty low. He was down in the dumps. And, it was such a high that they rode last season. And it's just been clunky. And you said it, I thought, really good on the Sunday show after the game, that there is to be a little bit of an expectation of a letdown. It's happening for Josh himself in this offense. But I think what Brian did a really good job of is he kind of flipped the script and focused on the good things that Josh has been doing. And Sean McDermott kind of doubled down on that today. Some of the things that, maybe we weren't focusing in on enough. Sean mentioned it today, the throwaways on first down, where the Josh Allen of 2019 probably would have tried to force something, make something happen with things going bad. He made the smart play. And Brian Dable said, if you got to throw the ball away 5 or 6 times in a game and it's the right decision, it's the smart play, do it every time. I want you to do that. That's important.
It's very important. And, not just throwing it away and not trying to fit a dangerous pass but instead of trying to maybe elude the pressure and end up with a sack that goes for 15 or 20-yard loss. We haven't really seen that either. He's had pressure in his face a few times, and he's done enough to roll away to get out of the pocket, so that way when he does throw away, he doesn't get flagged for intentional grounding. So he's done a nice job in some areas like that. He put together a really good drive to start the second half in that Miami game. We know about the pass to Emmanuel Sanders early. So there were bits and pieces. There were flashes. And you mentioned it, though. He may not be despondent right now, but there's that picture going around. I guess it's not a meme, but there's the picture of him sitting there looking upset on the sidelines in that Miami game, and underneath it shows the score, and it literally says 35-0 Bills. But he looks so unpleased with his performance that he's going to put that work in. He's going to watch the tape, see what teams are doing, and he and Brian Dable are really going to go out there and make some adjustments here sooner rather than later.
I thought Sean, he was saying some interesting things too. And, I actually asked him the question about Josh and reacting to some of his early season struggles here. And, he said he made the comment that maybe we're missing some of it in the media because we're focused on what he did last year. And obviously the contract came up, and when you become the second richest player in the NFL, the expectations move up. And they were already going to be sky high, even if the deal wasn't done. And you see how Lamar Jackson has played to start this season. He looks like he's regained his MVP form. The pressure just kind of gets ratcheted up. But he said inside the building, they want to play winning football. And this team on both sides of the ball did that. They scored 5 times, and some of the plays that Josh made allowed them to score. And one play in particular that I think Sean was talking about, some short throws that in the past, I think, 2019 Josh Allen struggled with. There was that big play in the third quarter, 3rd and 6. It was just a 7-yard gain to Stephon Diggs. Allen was rolling out to his left. He threw back across his body, and it was a gorgeous dart. I mean, Xavier Howard was plastered on him. I mean, it was really good coverage. He put in a place, 7-yard gain, first down. The next play, the Dawson Knox touchdown. So they're trying to focus on some of the little things. And I've maintained throughout this whole 2-game funk, if you will, there's little pieces to this, to me, that feel like they're laying the groundwork for this offense to really start, collecting the snowball, rolling down the hill as it gets bigger and bigger. They're figuring out ways to be effective in the run game. They're energizing their offensive line in that department. You could see it on Sunday, the way that, John Feliciano and Deion Dawkins reacted running down the field to celebrate with Devin Singletary. They're having these little pockets of success. And when they finally start to have it, and if Josh can focus on getting in that early game rhythm, that's when I think this passing offense can take off.
Yeah, I think you made some great points there. And there were also little plays where Josh used his feet, some run plays where he moved the chains. He needed 6 yards. He ended up getting 7. There was the one where it was initially ruled a touchdown, but he was ruled short. It was still 1st and goal after that. So he's running when he needs to. He was being savvy. I thought that throw to Knox that you mentioned was maybe one of his best throws of the day because the placement on it was right on the money. So there's things for him to build on. But overall, there's so much for this team overall to build on. The emergence of Devin Singletary over these first 2 weeks, looking more like the rookie version of himself. Zach Moss being able to punch the ball in twice. Obviously, John Feliciano bouncing back with 2 big key run blocks to let each of those backs score. And then the defense itself has been unbelievable across the board, front 7, secondary, you name it. So there's these building blocks in place. And if you can get the defense playing like it has the first 2 weeks, get Josh Allen back on track, and keep that run game or maintain the run game, this team will be more dangerous than the team that made it to the championship game 1 year ago. Now, mind you, there's a lot of ifs in there and things like that, but they obviously have the talent to get it done.
We got it cooking, Ryan. The comment section's going over on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, welcome into the Shout Buffalo Football Podcast. I'm Matt Parrino, joined as always by Ryan Talbot. If you're new here, welcome in. We're so glad you could join us. Hit that like button for us. Hit that subscribe button as well. It'll let you know when we're going live every time. We're going to have 3 shows this week. We got the Wednesday staple. We're in progress right now. We're going to give that first look at the Washington football team in a little bit. Friday is going to be our actual preview show. You will get the prediction from Ryan and I. We'll go a little bit deeper into this game. And then Sunday, after the game, as always, you can catch us there as well. You know, what's been working for this team so far through 2 games, Ryan, has been this defense. And I think, you know, there's been a couple performers that have really stood out, but I wanted to focus in a little bit more on AJ Epenesa today. And I know we've both gone back and watched the game. I mean, can you really put into perspective a little bit how important his emergence is for this defense, knowing what else they have available on the defensive line?
Yeah, Matt, when we went live after the game, I think he ended up being our 3rd star of the game. I went back and rewatched it. He jumped all the way up to my 1st star of the game. He was the guy. 9 pressures on 28 pass rush attempts. That's insanity in itself. And it's the way that he did it. He used power moves at times. He ducked down past the right tackle and got right around him on that hit on Tua. He was able to cut inside on one of the plays where he had pressure. None of those plays resulted in sacks for AJ Epenesa, but it resulted in a sack for Greg Rousseau. It resulted in a sack for Justin Zimmer. It resulted in a turnover on downs on the play that he knocked Tua out and injured his ribs. And it resulted in an intentional grounding on a hit that he had on Jacoby Brissett. So 4 of his 9 pressures, and that's just 4 off the top of my head, resulted in really positive plays for this Bills defense. And if you get him going and you get Greg Rousseau cleaning up some of these sacks and you still have Jerry Hughes and Mario Addison, we saw what Ed Oliver did in week 1. This defensive line under Eric Washington, under Leslie Frazier, has the potential to really make a Josh Allen-like ascension from 1 year to the next, where I thought they were a little disappointing last year and they can take this huge leap this year. I think we're off to a really promising start.
You know, I look at this line and I look at Epenesa, and I mentioned it in our chat before we went live here today, is I saw a different player today at the podium. I mean, every time we talked to AJ since he got drafted, I mean, we saw a little bit of that, you know, fire when he slid in the draft. But over the course of this last year, it's really been about figuring out how to build the house up to being a contributing player on this team. And I feel like there was such a sigh of relief. I don't even want to say sigh of relief, but I feel like he could finally be himself now. And I saw that in the press conference today. I thought that he came out and there was a couple things that really stood out to me. First of all, that, you know, the intelligence level that he's now playing with. He's always had it. He's been a smart guy. I think that's something that stood out during the draft process. But he talked about, you know, setting things up over the course of the game. And, you know, they were pushing with the bull rush over and over again. He was trying to use his hands. He was trying to be physical. They were doing that as a unit, all the guys. And what they were doing is they were kind of setting a trap so that as the game goes along, they can kind of start to win with different moves. And now, of course, the move that he really won with early was that speed rush on the outside that knocked Tua out. And we learned today that Tua's got fractured ribs. I mean, that was a shot that is really going to have an impact on the Miami Dolphins franchise. I mean, who's to say when he's ready to go where they're at? There was already on shaky ground with Tua there, right?
Oh, absolutely on shaky ground. And if you lose these next few games with Jacoby Brissett, you might start thinking, what do we have to do in 2022 to get this right? Do we have to go back to the drawing board and draft a quarterback? Do the rumors around Deshaun Watson, who's just sitting there in Houston and not playing week after week, do those heat up again around the trade deadline? Do they sell the farm maybe if they're even in the mix for a wild card spot to try to do something this year and long term? It is really interesting because there's still just as many questions as there are answers about Tua. But one thing on AJ Epenesa, listen, there's a lot of trust involved when you get drafted by a team and they tell you, we like you, we like your skill set, but we want you to drop down by about 20 pounds from where you've played your entire college career. I'm sure in his mind, he's thinking, is my power still going to be there? Am I really going to gain that much speed? But he went ahead and did it last year. And you saw flashes that second Patriots game late in the season of what he could be. But he's already surpassed his pressure amount from his entire rookie year through 2 weeks. And that speaks volumes. Mm-hmm. The fact that he had 9 pressures in one game speaks volumes. And like you said, when you see those kind of results in 2 games, you compare it to what he did over his entire rookie year. Yeah, I would hope you'd see a different AJ Epenesa up at the podium. His confidence right now should be sky high.
Here's something else that he said that I thought was really, I mean, to me, this is the real indicator of a player, right? I asked him, you had about as good of a game as you could have without actually recording a sack. Here's what he said. It's exciting because you do so well and sacks are distributed to the whole team. The Bills had 6, but it's also disappointing just because you get there so many times and you don't quite get him down. You could be one step or he throws it right before you get there. Or you just miss him. I had a couple of just plain old misses. So those are the things I want to cut down on and keep those pressures coming, but get him down and get that loss of yardage there. There's a hunger here in this player. I mean, you almost, whet the appetite a little bit with their ability to win in all these fun, different ways. And you're starting to really see yourself. It's one thing to do these things in practice, but I think it's something else completely to do it in the game. And now you set yourself up that, you're setting new goals for yourself. Okay, you had 9 pressures this week. How do I get a sack and 8 or 9 pressures again next week? And this week, especially, we're going to talk to Sam in a little while about Taylor Heineke, Ryan Fitzpatrick out, and the very young quarterback who I thought, Sean McDermott was very high on today. And we'll talk about that in a little while as well. This could be another game where a guy like AJ can feast. And then you're talking about Davis Mills with Houston in 2 weeks. I mean, it is a nice now 4 games to start for a couple young defensive linemen.
Yeah, and listen, Heineke's shown some things. I thought he had a really impressive performance last year in the playoffs against Tampa Bay. I thought he was really good on Thursday Night Football against the Giants last week. He'll have a little extra preparation coming into this game. But there's going to be opportunities where he's going to hold the ball and Epenesa can come up from behind or another pass rusher, and he can clean up those misses because he's right. There were some where he was right on Jacoby Brissett's back and he missed him. And then that led to another sack for, I think it was Rousseau's second one. He came in a split second later. So he's going to have opportunities. And then Davis Mills, I'm sure that whole defensive line is going to be licking their chops, so to speak, just because in an ideal world, when you look at these 2 rosters, Buffalo, it seems like they have significantly more talent. They should be able to build a lead. And then you put Davis Mills in a have to pass all the time situation. That could be where AJ Epenesa or Greg Rousseau or some of these guys end up with multiple sacks in that matchup.
All right, so the chat is popping here, Ryan. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe to the Shout Football Podcast. It'll give you a notification in the YouTube app every time that we go live. Everybody wants to talk about the newest Buffalo Bills practice squad offensive tackle. Bobby Hart is back in the mix. And, this move comes one day after the Philadelphia Eagles got pretty crafty and poached rookie guard Jack Anderson, the Bills' 7th round draft pick, from the Bills practice squad. Initial thoughts on Anderson out and Bobby Hart back in?
It's kind of like when you ask someone to bring maybe like Dr. Pepper to a birthday party and they go to the dollar store and they get like that generic version of it. And I'm not saying that Jack Anderson's ever going to develop into something, but I think the Bills really liked him, or like, Dr. Thunder or something like that instead of Dr. Pepper. So
No, it's Mr. Pibb, dude. Isn't
Mr.
Mr.
Pibb,
Pibb the
I think
knockoff?
Mr. Pibb, I think that's still kind of a brand name. I think there's some real
Okay, because
generic
I was gonna
ones you
say
can get.
I like Mr. Pibb.
Yeah, and I
It's
think that's
delicious.
solid. I think that one's
Okay,
solid.
all right, my bad.
It's all right. But, we've already seen what Bobby Hart can do. And listen, the answer is not much. He was pretty bad at training camp. He was awful in the preseason. I have no idea how he started 13 games with the Cincinnati Bengals 1 year ago. That just kind of goes to show you the lack of offensive line talent across this league. He is a liability when he's on the field. I'm not sure what you're going to get out of him on this practice squad other than just an extra body occasionally. Maybe it's to help boost the confidence of some of these defensive linemen that'll go against in practice. I don't know. But he is not someone that you want to elevate on a week-by-week basis. He's not someone you want to get in your lineup. So, you hope he's just keeping the seat warm for another move that's to come.
Yeah, on Anderson, I think it's kind of disappointing, but this is the kind of situation that you find yourself in when you have a roster like this. And I know everybody likes to go back to the Bobby or the Wyatt Teller situation. For every Wyatt Teller, you're probably going to have 4 or 5 players that never end up even playing a snap in the NFL, or any meaningful snaps, I should say, in the NFL. So I think it's a slight overreaction, thinking that, the Bills lost out on some great player in Jack Anderson. And who's to say that, he gets back in the mix, they get healthy, and Jack Anderson is right back on the street, and the Bills can pluck him and bring him right back onto the practice squad as this season goes along. We'll see how that all plays out. But, Bobby Hart is probably a confidence booster, like you mentioned. I think that that's something that we saw during training camp all summer long. And, I think Greg Rousseau was able to go into the year with a lot of confidence from all the matchups. He got a chance to go against Bobby Hart. So we'll see how that progresses. All right. If you're just joining us, welcome into the show. Our numbers are popping. Appreciate you guys getting in here on a Wednesday night. We're brought to you by Tops Friendly Markets. From hot to go pizza and appetizers, signature fried chicken, baby back ribs and subs, delicious salads and brownie trays, Tops has everything you need to feed the hungriest fan. We are going to shift gears here shortly, and we are going to start to discuss this weekend's matchup, the Buffalo Bills and the Washington football team. Initial thoughts here, Ryan, before we get to Sam here, who's going to join us in a minute.
Yeah, I think this is kind of a good test for the Bills compared to where they struggled in week 1. I think that Washington's defensive front is really impressive in terms of talent and potential. So this offensive line is going to be challenged this week, and they're going to have to respond in a much more impressive fashion than they did against the Pittsburgh Steelers in week 1.
Indeed. Sam, what is up, my man? Can you pronounce your last name? Because I didn't want to say it because I said it at the start of the show, and I'm like, did I say it right?
Well, thank you guys for having me, Matt and Ryan. It's Fortier. It's super French.
Fortier. Okay. How did I pronounce it? I think I did it right, Ryan.
I think you did say Fortier, yeah.
Look at me. I'm feeling all types of good. We got Sam for 15 minutes, so I want to start firing questions at you. Thank you so much, my man, for joining us tonight on short notice. Huge game this weekend. The Washington football team comes in here, and I think most fans were excited to get a look at Ryan Fitzpatrick. It's going to be Taylor Heineke. Thoughts on how he's played so far and what the Bills can expect to see in him?
Yeah, for me, I think when you switch from Ryan Fitzpatrick to Taylor Heineke, you're really swapping experience for mobility. I mean, these guys, neither of them are the strongest armed guys. Obviously, they both like to go down the field. They both like, I think, throwing in rhythm. They kind of rely on their head maybe a little bit more than their physical ability. But with Taylor Heineke, you're going to see a lot of mobility. You're going to see some extending plays. He said he thinks that part of his game is similar to Josh Allen's. Obviously, Taylor Heineke is not 6'5" and does not have a rocket arm, but that's a little similar. And I think you're going to see him, maybe scramble for some first downs, though he tries to avoid that because that is what happened in the playoff game where he separated his shoulder, and that's happened to him a lot throughout his career. So I think you'll expect to see mobility, extending plays with his legs, and then trying to win with his head.
I really liked his performance on Thursday Night Football. Obviously, being a good quarterback, the first thing you want to do is get the ball to your playmakers. And Terry McLaurin had 11 receptions in that matchup, but he also hit Logan Thomas and McKissick, who's dangerous out of the backfield as a receiver, and Adam Humphries as well. So how is he doing in terms of getting past that first read and really spreading it out across the field based on what you saw last year in that playoff game, what maybe you saw over the summer, and obviously from Thursday Night Football?
Yeah, so the first thing we should say is that Taylor Heineke's sample size here is really only 11 quarters. He got cut at Carolina in August 2019. He was a backup in the XFL, the St. Louis Battlehawks, and then obviously came in here as the quarantine QB, and with Alex Smith injury ends up starting. So the sample size is small, but in terms of getting past his first read, I really think that is the thing that he would say is his strength. That touchdown to Ricky Seals-Jones, the third tight end in that back corner of the end zone on Thursday Night Football, the one right before they took the lead for good, that was his third read, and he threw it. Or he said that was his third read. He threw it away from the corner at a point where only his receiver could catch that ball. It was either going to be incomplete or a touchdown, and obviously it worked out. But I think reading the field, understanding what defenses are trying to do to him, when they bring pressure, when they, play man or zone. I mean, that's the strength of his game, is he thinks figuring that out and countering it.
Flipping to the other side of the ball, Buffalo in week 1 really struggled against Pittsburgh's defensive front. They weren't bringing extra pressure, blitzers or anything like that. And you look at Washington, obviously Chase Young is the name that everyone talks about, but can you speak a little bit about the rest of that defensive line and how much damage they could potentially do against Buffalo's offensive line on Sunday?
Yeah. So there's two parts to this. The first part is the talent. Like you said, Chase Young, but they have 3 other first-rounders. They have the 2 guys in the middle out of Alabama, Deron Payne and John Allen. John Allen signed a big contract extension this offseason, 4 years, $72 million. He already has 3 sacks in 2 games. That's more than he had all of last year with 2. And on the other side, at the other end, you got Montez Sweat, another big, long Chase Young type guy. Loves to use that long arm against tackles. I think that's, he might be one of the best long arms defensive ends in the league. So you have the talent. And certainly on paper, they should be able to get home. But in the first 2 games, they've actually been quite disappointing in Washington. It's been one of Ron Rivera's biggest frustrations with this team, is because those front 4 last year, this is what this team relied on to get pressure. I think they rushed about 2/3 of the time. They were rushing just 4, and they were generating a good amount of pressure with that. This year, they have not been successful for a multitude of reasons. You've had, missed assignments, according to Rivera. You've had, missed gaps. And I think that they've had to blitz a little bit more. So how much damage can they do to the Bills' offensive line, I think, is a big question, not just because of talent, but because of, can that talent apply the principles that they're supposed to?
Mm-hmm. And that's what I think a lot of teams have figured out against the Bills, at least to this stage in the season, is that if you can get pressure with that front 4, that's when you're able to kind of play back and take away some of their weapons. Let's go to the Washington secondary. Obviously, some interesting pieces there. I thought William Jackson was a nice free agent addition. Landon Collins, obviously, in the mix. What have you seen early on from them, and maybe their ability to take away Stephon Diggs or Cole Beasley, Emmanuel Sanders, some of the talent that the Bills have at the pass catching positions?
Last year, Washington struggled against number 1 receivers. They were in the bottom, they were in the bottom 5 of DVOA against top wideouts. And so I think what you saw was this offseason, Washington go out and get William Jackson for a player exactly like Stephon Diggs. Not only against Stephon Diggs, but this last year, this defense, I'm going to try this again. Defensive coordinator Jack Del Rio said he thought that they played a little bit too much zone. According to various analytics sites, they were playing about 60 to 70% zone. So with William Jackson, they're hoping to get a little bit more man coverage. They're hoping that they can maybe mix and match, 3rd and shorts, especially you want to be able to play press man. And William Jackson allows you to do that in theory. There's been a little bit of trouble translating that over, especially with the footwork and the technique of teaching William Jackson how to play man. He's talked about that being a process. So that's his side of it. You have Kendall Fuller, who's playing outside and inside, really versatile piece. But like you said, I think Landon Collins, they have a really interesting 3 safety rotation right now. I think they're using it, based on certain packages. But you've got Cam Curl, the rookie standout from last year's 7th-round pick. You've got Landon Collins, who I think has struggled a little bit coming back from that Achilles tear, even though that he looked good. And Bobby McCain, that center fielder, free safety from Miami. Those 3 really rotate between those 2 spots, and in certain packages there are 3 of them on the field. But I think really when you talk about this defensive back group, you talk about William Jackson, can he be that number 1 guy? And you talk about who of the 3 safeties are on the field. And I think opposing offenses have really been looking at rookie cornerback Benjamin St. Juste, to give you guys another name. I know I started to overload, but the 3rd-round pick out of Minnesota, the 3rd-round pick out of Minnesota outside, the Chargers really went after him in his debut. And I think that's a guy who, especially young in his career, when you look at the veteran experience, that's a guy people have been picking on. And I think Landon Collins as well. The Giants in the run game, ran a couple of read options to his side, and one of them sprung loose for a 56-yard gain. So I think those are the 2, Juice and Collins. Those are the 2 that the Bills, might target if they're like Washington's previous opponents.
Sam, Brian Dable isn't shy to draw up some design run plays for Josh Allen. And last week on Thursday Night Football, Daniel Jones rushed for 95 yards and a touchdown on 9 carries. What was it that the Giants were doing, or that schematically maybe that worked so well for Jones that maybe the Bills could mimic this Sunday?
Set you up perfectly for that transition. Really, that's what they were doing. They were running that read option with Jones, and it was really what they'd done the last 3 games that Jones had played with them, and really, I think Ron Rivera was kind of baffled by the lack of discipline on the edge. You have the second group of defensive ends, James Smith-Williams, gave up a really long one. Landon Collins, as I said, gave up a really long one. So I think it's really, I don't think the schematics, maybe Dayball will come up with something I hadn't seen before, but I don't think the schematics were the problem for Washington stopping Jones. I think it was really just discipline, because Ron Rivera can get fired up in press conferences for sure, but I think that one, he almost looked a little nonplussed. He looked a little confused, like, hey, he's done this to us the last 3 games. We told you he was going to do it again, and yet still we weren't able to stop it. So I think it's a little bit more confusion rather than or it's a little bit more confusion in execution rather than a confusion creating that gap.
So Antonio Gibson, obviously a fantasy breakout star last year, dealing with a shoulder injury, was limited today. Do you anticipate that he plays? And even if he does play, being banged up, how are things kind of stacking up behind him? Because obviously a lot of local Buffalo football fans rooting for Jared Patterson, maybe get some carries.
Yeah, Jared Patterson was extremely complimentary of New Era Field, if it's still called that. Which I got to say, I went to Syracuse, so I've certainly been there, and it is a tremendous environment. But to get to the real thing that people want to know, fantasy football, Antonio Gibson's shoulder, I think, is going to be fine. He injured it in week 1. He was on the injury report before the Giants game, and he ended up being fine. The diminished carries, the diminished touches for him on Thursday Night Football were really situational, because when Washington went no huddle, shotgun, 2-minute drive there at the end, they used running back J.D. McKissick, who was a big factor last year, but they just like him a little bit better in the pass game. They think his experience, he's the type of guy that they want in there during those situations. So I think it's going to be a little bit script dependent, but Antonio Gibson has actually shown a lot of progress as a rusher this year. He averaged, I think, between 5 and 6 yards a carry against the Giants. And that's important because at Memphis, he was a receiver. Learning running back is new to him. And Ron Rivera talks about him, stepping into this Christian McCaffrey-esque role. And I think that might be a little soon. And obviously, anytime you talk about Christian McCaffrey, that's a high comparison. But I think that Antonio Gibson's health should be fine. I think that J.D. McKissick is that second back after him. And we haven't seen a ton of Jarrett Patterson, but I think if the game is lopsided either way in the fourth quarter, I think, or if there's a certain package, if they see something they like, I think you're going to see a few snaps maybe for Jarrett Patterson.
Matt set this up beautifully because Jarrett Patterson has ties to the area from his UB days. There's another player on Washington's roster, Cole Holcomb. His parents were both actually graduates from Portville, New York, just, about an hour and a half away from Buffalo. What can you tell fans about Holcomb early in his career here in Washington? Obviously, he's been there for a few seasons now, 11 tackles week one. I think he had 5 or 6 last week. What is his importance to this defense?
Best hair in the NFL. And I think you might laugh because this team has had Ryan Fitzpatrick on the field, but he has gone full Joe Dirt mullet. And he is really that was like his quarantine hairstyle. I grew a beard for the first time. He really leaned into the mullet, and his girlfriend is really upset. He says, but he's really leaned on that. But for real, I think he is been mostly the Sam linebacker, covering, tight ends, running backs out of the backfield. That's been his main responsibility. John Bostic on the other side has done it sometimes, but really you've seen him step into a really important role. And he's not, I think, the centerpiece of this defense because that's Jamin Davis, the first-round pick out of Kentucky, even though he's had a little bit of a slow start. Ron Rivera has called him, because everybody has to have a Carolina comp, he's called him the Luke Kuechly of this team, or who he wants to be the Luke Kuechly. Mm-hmm. So I think Cole Holcomb is that outside backer, that complimentary guy, and obviously he led this team. He was maybe second on this team in tackles last year. He's a really important figure, and I think what you've seen from him in his growth in his games is trusting his speed in coverage, saying, hey, I can hang with these tight ends. I can hang with these backs out of the backfield. And so I think that really that's what you're going to see from him on the field on Sunday.
Got an active comment section. Everybody's so grateful. Bills fans always loving the view from the other side here. One more person that, I think Bills fans are very fond of from learning his story, started his career here, Logan Thomas. Curious, if you guys have talked to him this week. I don't know if you've talked to him yet, but what he's kind of thinking, if you have, about coming back to play in the Bills, and how has that role expanded over the course of time there? Because here I always thought that there was something there, but it just never clicked. And it's interesting. There's been a couple players under Sean McDermott, for as many people as they've developed in the system here, that have gone on to have success afterwards. What's he done?
Yeah, we have not talked to Logan Thomas this week, but he's talked about Buffalo and Arizona previous stops before. And I think really in Detroit, it's been a pretty remarkable growth for him, because in 2020, when they start this rebuild and tight end seems like the most obvious position they have to address, and they go out and get a guy who I think at the time had maybe 30 targets career as a tight end, you start to worry and say, okay, what's going on here? But tight ends coach Pete Hainer is a big believer in Thomas. He has this prototypical tight end profile, 6'5", certain amount of arm length and weight and height and speed and all that. And Logan Thomas checks every box. And so when he brought him in here, Pete Hainer's a real salt of the earth guy. He stands close to the media at practice, and he is, he's crushing Logan on the daily, even even though it's a star pupil. But I think the strides Logan has made last year, obviously 700 yards, 60 catches, statistics that seemed outlandish if you had said them before the season. Pete Hainer really said, hey, I think that's just a step. I think he has another leap in him. I think this guy can be a top 5 tight end in the league. And so the thing that I took from that, other than I need someone in my corner who believes in me like Pete Hainer believes in Logan, is just you should expect to see his role in the offense continue to grow, especially if you're going to have a guy like Taylor Heineke, who isn't necessarily going to take all the deep shots and he's going to like to check it down. I think that's a guy who you're going to see, probably pretty active.
So great stuff. We're going to get you out of here. Are you coming into town to cover the game this weekend?
Yes, I will be. I'm taking a trip through Syracuse, but I'll be there on Saturday night.
Beautiful. Hit me up if you need any wing recommendation. We always have you covered. Sam Fortier, the Washington Post, coolest Twitter bio out there. Football team beat. You could have it in there for at least another maybe year or so when they finally pick a name. But we appreciate you, man. Thanks so much for coming on. We'll get you out of here.
Of course, thanks so much for having me, guys. And I'll leave you on this. Jared Patterson says the best wings in Buffalo are Elmo's bar, I believe. So people can debate that. I know Gabriel's Gate was the place where I went when people, we went over there in college. But yeah, I thought I'd get out of there with that. So thanks so much, guys, for having me. I really appreciate it.
Beautiful. Take care, man.
Yeah.
All right. There we go. From the Washington football beat, Sam Fortier bringing you all the knowledge. He was awesome. I mean, that was great. Just having him check in there. We always enjoy that. We're going to bring in Sarah Holland now to the program. She has been keeping up with all of you folks in the chat, all you scoundrels, discussing everything happening in Bills land. Sarah, what do you got for us?
So I want to just make sure that if you're watching on YouTube, give a like and subscribe. We appreciate you guys being here. Make sure to stick around for the rest of the show tonight. So I do want to bring in a good question that I actually caught in the chat at the beginning of tonight's show. It was by Anthony Cole, I believe. And he asked if Taron Johnson keeps playing at this level, will the Bills be able to retain him this offseason?
It's a great question, Ryan. And first of all, this is a great example. I'll let Ryan start here because we were actually talking about this, me and Joe Piscaglia from The Athletic today. So we can get into that in a minute, but I want Ryan to take it first. It's a great example why, even if you drop a question in the first couple minutes now, you better stick around for the end because it could be featured in our special closing section. Ryan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, my thoughts are he's already approaching that status of you can't let this guy leave based on what we've seen in the second half of 2020 and the beginning of 2021. And, the price could be a little higher than some people expect because a lot of teams realize the importance of the nickel cornerback position. But that being said, I think there's also a lot of Bills players that realize that if you leave Buffalo, especially if it's a short-term deal or maybe you're not blown away with the other offers, you might not fit into other defenses schematically like you do in the ones that you currently play in. So I think there's something to be said about Taron Johnson wanting to stay in Buffalo. He's comfortable here. He knows the ins and outs of this defense extremely well. We've seen so many players who have left, not just in Buffalo, across the league, go to a new team, a new system, and really struggle and never find that same success. So I think that the Bills are going to be able to move some money around, have that right amount of money there if he continues to play the way that he has early here in 2021.
One guy to look at, I think, was considered at a time, especially when he signed the deal, was Kenny Moore from Indianapolis, signed a 4-year, $33 million contract. And that's something that you're probably looking at. But, there's a couple factors that kind of are baked in here. The Bills are going to have some decisions to make. You play your quarterback. He's obviously going to, cost significantly more next year. You're probably looking at a new deal for Stephon Diggs here pretty soon, especially if he's able to turn in a year like this. Star Lotulelei, who I want to talk about a little bit today, he did not practice, which is a separate topic that I think we should get into. I think he showed, without a shadow of a doubt, his importance this past weekend. I think a lot of the success that this Bills defensive line had this past week, I think you can attribute some of that, at least, to Star's presence and his ability to get back in there, eat some of those blocks. And I even, Joe said it in his, I think his all 22 column. Star was even pretty effective as a pass rusher in this game. And so that's a situation where, yeah, I know that they've stocked up there. They have Vernon Butler, they have Harrison Phillips, they have Justin Zimmer. But I think, we saw that movie last year. And I think that what they were banking on is getting Star back and being able to utilize some of these younger players and have them work off of what he brings to the table. So even if you restructure Star's deal, I think his importance and his value is at about where you have it. So that's something that you're going to have to consider is some of these guys that you paid Matt Milano. He's playing like one of the best linebackers in the NFL right now. Taron Johnson, if he's able to have this full season, that I think that you do want to keep him in the mix, but the financials of it all are going to be interesting to track. All right, what else you got for us, Sarah?
All right, so there was lots of praise for the Bills defense tonight in the chat, especially earlier on. And I know that you guys are going to go into a little bit more detail on Friday. But what are some keys that you guys have for the Bills defense in Week 3 against Washington?
Go ahead, Matt.
So, I'm looking at this situation, and I think hearing Sam talk about where things have been a struggle for the Washington football team so far is not getting pressure with that front four. I think if you're the Bills, you look to, you know, um, take advantage of some mismatches, maybe some matchup problems for the Washington football team in their secondary. Go back to week 1 and 2, Ryan. These were teams that not only matched up well with the Bills, they were teams that were familiar with the Bills. Pittsburgh played them last year. Washington is ultra familiar. Not Washington. Miami's ultra familiar with this Bills offense after playing it twice last season. Washington does not have that luxury. And while Ron Rivera is obviously very familiar with Sean McDermott's defense, what Brian Dable does on offense, I think that's, unless they're really able to overwhelm this offensive line, which could be the case. I mean, Chase Young is a beast. Montez Sweat, obviously, Allen in the middle. He's been really impressive. I think that they have the horses up front to make things interesting, but I just wonder in that secondary if they have enough, that back seven, to take this group of playmakers out of a game for a third straight week.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Matt. Those wide receivers, I think, are going to have more opportunities in this game. You saw in the first week against the Chargers, I want to say that Williams and Allen combined for almost 180 yards receiving, 17 receptions. So they don't have the depth at wide receiver that Buffalo has, and their top two guys were able to kind of feast on that defense to a certain extent. I think that Buffalo's receiving core is going to have their moments. And for the Bills on defense, I think it's all about getting that pressure for the second consecutive week. You have Taylor Heineke, who, as was mentioned by Sam, has 11 quarters of experience. You get that pressure on him, and he's going to try to make some plays with his arm that maybe he shouldn't be attempting. And that's when Trey White can come in, and Levi Wallace, who, again, watching back that game, the way he peeled off his receiver to intercept that pass to Mike Gesicki, just showed, his knowledge of the game, his knowledge of this defense so well. The secondary the safety unit with Hyde and Poyer. I think there's going to be opportunities for interceptions if that front four of Buffalo's can get the pressure, or if they send that extra blitzer, because I think Heineke is at that point now where he's not thinking about throwing it away or just, making the safe play. He wants to prove over this stretch of time that he's that franchise quarterback, and that when Ryan Fitzpatrick's back, they don't turn over the keys to the veteran. So he's going to get himself into some situations that I think the Bills can take advantage of on Sunday.
All right, Sarah, take us through the injury report, if you would, because I think both of us will have some thoughts on what's happening here on Wednesday.
Yeah, so let's see here. Okay, I have it pulled up right here on Twitter. So we have, so we see that Cole Beasley and Jerry Hughes, they both have the vet rest, but I also saw that Star Lotulelei is injured with groin, and Levi Wallace with a knee. Let's see.
Yeah, I want to get into that first and foremost, Ryan, because what's interesting about the Levi Wallace situation with the knee injury, we thought that was cramping the other day. So unless that happened on the practice field the last couple of days, I feel like that's kind of a new development. Dane Jackson also listed today with a knee injury. He was limited. Now, Sean did not mention him this morning, so that seems like something that maybe was tweaked during practice. Now you're looking at your CB2 and Levi Wallace, who had to lead the last game dealing with a knee. He was full today, so that's a good sign. He looked like he was moving around well. Dane Jackson now limited with a knee. Your depth is all of a sudden an issue. They got Cam Lewis on the practice squad. There was a couple of workouts this week that now all of a sudden, like our good friend Bruce Nolan pointed out on my tweet earlier, make a lot of sense. What were they?
Yeah, they had Quentin Dunbar in. They had Demarius Randall in, so cornerback and a safety. I was told nothing imminent on Randall, but you never know. You want to do your due diligence on players like that, especially at this point in the season, because you're one injury away or you're one move away, like we saw when the Bills lost Jack Anderson. Some people were speculating maybe one of those two secondary players would take that spot. It obviously was hard at the time, but you always want to have a list of players ready to go at both positions, and it wouldn't shock me if Dunbar was kind of waiting in the wings here to sign sooner rather than later. But you mentioned unfortunate. Levi Wallace participating in full today. That's an encouraging sign. And I think cramping is the logical assumption that people came up with, because the way they were stretching him out on the field, that's not something you typically do when someone says that their knee's giving them issues. It's when you're cramping, the Miami heat that was going on in that game. So you have to wonder if and when it took place, but encouraging that he participated in full. Dane Jackson, you want to see him participate a little bit more here over the course of the week as well. But then shifting gears to Star Latulilae, Matt, you were mentioning how important he was 1 week ago. It's troublesome to see him on this injury report again and missing a practice with a groin injury, because, groin injuries, no matter what the position, can be tricky. But when you're talking about a big man in the middle, that can really affect your play, not just on a week-by-week basis. It can knock some players out for an expanded amount of time.
So another injury of note, Mike Hyde still dealing with that neck issue. He played last week, obviously, but he was in the red non-contact jersey. I got a message this week, Ryan, from Sarah Holland, and it's her third Sunday covering the Bills with us here at Syracuse.com. And she's like, my mom got me tickets to the game on Sunday, so can I have the day off until the podcast? And I'm like, of course. I mean, you're going to be at the game. You're gonna see it all up close. Now, is this your first Bills game in person, or have you been already?
So I actually went. It's kind of a tradition. I went my freshman year of college, so right before COVID, against the Washington football team. I think it was like early November. It was actually a birthday present. But since I'm from the DC area, it's kind of exciting to get to watch my hometown team play the Bills. So yeah, I'm super excited.
That's awesome. So she's going to take in all the festivities. The place is going to be packed and rocking. Although I did see that there are still some tickets left. I'd imagine that there will not be those tickets left by Sunday. It's going to be a fun one. We will be back live on Friday night. We're going to have our preview show. It's going to be a little bit shorter version, maybe 25 minutes. We will bring you some stats, some details, go a little bit deeper. We'll talk to some more players over the next couple of days. We'll get some coverage from coming out of the Washington area. Big game on Sunday as the Bills look to go to 2-1. We'll probably even have a little bit of an AFC East slant to the show as well. This has been the Shout Buffalo Bills football podcast, brought to you by Tops Friendly Markets. Hosting a large party? Check out Tops' huge selection of party platters for a delicious, effortless, and affordable, no-stress way to impress. For complete details, stop by their carryout cafe or visit topsmarkets.com/fantasy foodball. That's FOODBALL. Ryan Talbot, Sarah Holland. We are out of here. I'm Matt Parrino.